Okay, you know the drill. Introduction, 3 body paragraphs, conclusion. Sound familiar? For millions of us, the 5-paragraph essay was a total rite of passage. It was this classroom fixture that felt less like a writing tool and more like a fundamental law of physics. But here's the thing. Behind this simple formula is a surprisingly intense and controversial story about how we're all taught to think.
I mean, really, think back on it. That intro with the classic 3-pronged thesis, each body paragraph neatly tackling one of those prongs, and a conclusion that, let's be honest, just kind of repeats everything you just said. Did you ever get that feeling that your ideas were being shoved into a container that was just way too small? And this is where it gets really fascinating. Educators are totally divided on this. Is the 5-paragraph essay an essential scaffold that gives new writers a clear, helpful roadmap? Or is it a cognitive straitjacket that actually hurts our intellectual growth by forcing us to flatten our thoughts and killing any real sense of curiosity? All right, let's dive in. First, we have to acknowledge just how everywhere this format is. It's like the ghost that haunts the American classroom. It's so common that we almost never stop to ask where it came from or what it's for. It just is. And that ubiquity is its real power, because it's taught so early and you have to practice it so often, it gets this status of an undisputed, timeless rule. But as we're about to find out, its history is anything but timeless. In fact, it's surprisingly recent. Yeah, here's the twist. The 5-paragraph essay isn't some ancient tradition handed down from the great thinkers of classical rhetoric. Nope. Its origins are way more recent and, honestly, a lot more pragmatic than you'd ever imagine. To really get what the essay has become, you have to look at what it was meant to be. Back in the 16th century, the philosopher Montaigne basically invented the form. And for him, an essay, which is French for a trial or an attempt, was all about the process of discovery. It was about trying to figure things out on the page, not performing ideas you already had locked down. And this timeline just captures that shift perfectly. We went from Montaigne's wide-open exploration in 1580 to this really rigid, rule-based thing called theme writing in the 1870s. And that marks this huge cognitive shift from writing as a form of inquiry to writing as a performance of what you already know. And here is the absolute kicker. The guy who first used the specific term 5-paragraph essay back in 1959, Victor Pudlowski, well, he was brutally honest about its purpose. The goal, he said, was to reduce the scope for originality. It wasn't designed to foster creativity. It was designed to constrain it. It was all about uniformity. So if it wasn't designed to create amazing writers, what on earth made it so powerful that it completely took over American education? Well, the answer has a lot less to do with good teaching and a lot more to do with, believe it or not, logistics. Think about it. With the rise of mass education in the 20th century, you suddenly have this massive problem. How in the world do you grade millions of student essays quickly, cheaply, and consistently? The system needed a machine. It needed a uniform product that could be easily scanned and scored. And this created this powerful, almost inescapable feedback loop. It's called assessment washback. See how it works? The big standardized tests needed a formula that was fast to grade. The 5-paragraph essay? Perfect. So teachers started teaching the formula to get their students high scores. And of course, the students who used it were rewarded. Pretty soon, the test itself started dictating the entire curriculum. The ultimate example of this whole machine was the mandatory essay, which ran from 2005 to 2016. It was a 25-minute, super high-stakes sprint that pretty much required you to use a formula if you wanted any hope of producing a coherent essay under that kind of pressure. And it gets worse. In a really damning study, Les Parliament from MIT found that he could accurately predict a student's essay score based on just 2 things: its length and its use of big, fancy-sounding words. It didn't even matter if the words were used correctly. Factual accuracy? Nope, didn't matter. The test wasn't measuring critical thinking, it was measuring how well a student could reproduce a template on demand. So all of this brings us right back to the heart of this huge debate. Is this thing a helpful starting point, or is it a permanent prison for the mind? And this chart lays out that conflict perfectly. On the one hand, you have the scaffold argument. Proponents say, hey, it provides a clear roadmap for beginners, it builds confidence. But on the other side, you have the straitjacket argument. Critics say it imposes a totally artificial structure that discourages complexity, flattens a writer's voice, and ultimately fails to prepare students for real college-level work. So maybe the most crucial point is this.
The real debate isn't about whether the form can be a helpful scaffold. The problem is that the pressures of the system, the nonstop standardized tests, the need for efficient grading, it all means those training wheels almost never come off. What's meant to be a temporary tool becomes the final destination. So if you're feeling trapped, how do you get out? For so many students, moving beyond this formula is one of the biggest challenges when they get to college. So let's look at the escape plan. A lot of students get hit with this college transition shock. The exact formula that earned them A's in high school is suddenly seen as simplistic, even juvenile, by professors who are looking for nuance, for complexity, and for arguments that just don't fit neatly into three little boxes. So the toolkit for escaping this trap is really about upgrading each part of the essay. First, you've got to deconstruct that simple thesis and turn it into a complex, nuanced claim that actually raises questions. Then you learn to weave your argument, making sure each paragraph builds on the last one instead of just sitting there by itself. You can deepen your analysis with tools like the meal plan. That's main idea, evidence, analysis, and link, which forces you to explain why your evidence actually matters. And finally, you have to reimagine the conclusion, not as a boring summary, but as a place to explore the real-world implications of your argument. But honestly, the most important shift is mental. It's about moving from a structure-first approach, where you're just looking for simple ideas to plug into the box, to an idea-first approach, where you let a complex, messy, interesting idea generate its own organic structure. This quote just sums up the entire challenge perfectly. The goal shouldn't be to teach students how to produce artifacts of compliance, things that just look like good essays. The goal should be to empower them to use writing as a tool for genuine creation and real inquiry. And this really shows the path forward. We need to bring the essay full circle and reclaim it for what it was always supposed to be. Not a box to be filled, but an opportunity to grapple with complexity and to discover what you really think in the very act of writing it down. So, I'll leave you with this question to chew on. In your own writing, in your own thinking, is this formula a useful scaffold that you can pick up when you need it and put down when you don't? Or is it a prison whose walls you're still trying to break through?